Welcome to the Rise and Wander podcast, where we'll explore adventure, spirituality, and empowerment through the outdoors and beyond. Join me, Carla Amador, as we focus on topics around the mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional benefits derived through the outdoors. You'll also hear inspiring stories, get educated, and more. Let's get started. This season's podcast is sponsored by Oboz Footwear, based out of Bozeman, Montana. I proudly wear my Oboz footwear for hiking, traveling, and more. They have many styles and options to choose from for all your winter and hiking needs. Looking for hiking boots, recovery shoes, or fast and light hikers? Look no further and check them out at obozfootwear.com. Welcome to the Rise and Wander podcast. Today, I'm talking with Jess, who was one of the participants on the Kilimanjaro trip. And if you listen to the previous episodes, I talked about everyone who came on the trip. And Jess is this incredible outdoorsy gal I met here in New Mexico when I first moved here. And somewhere along the lines throughout our friendship, we were talking about this upcoming trip, and Jess said she was interested in joining, and thankfully that actually manifested. And so I wanted to bring her on so that you hear the experience of at least one of the other participants that joined the trip. So without further ado, welcome, Jess. Thanks for joining. So tell me a little bit about what inspired you to sign up for the Kilimanjaro trip.
Something very different than anything that I've done before. I've climbed a lot of mountains, but nothing as high as Kilimanjaro. I'd never done anything in another country, and it just was calling to me. I thought the idea of doing this trip with a group of people that I didn't know sounded really interesting and appealing, and sharing that experience. I knew it wasn't something that I wanted to do alone. I wanted to share that experience. So yeah, it felt like the right time in my life for this to happen.
That's awesome. Had you previously traveled anywhere outside of the country? What was your experience with traveling internationally?
I've mostly gone to Europe, Mexico, and Canada. And I had done a trip in Europe trekking in the Alps last summer, so about 6 months before Kilimanjaro. And that kind of fueled me to do another international trip like this. So I caught that bug.
I love that. Yeah. And I think going somewhere like Africa, where it's completely like unknown if you haven't really been to a country like Tanzania, might be just a little bit more outside of someone's comfort zone. So I would feel like I would want to share that myself with someone. And I think Africa was high up on my list of places to visit. So when I was thinking about going to do Kilimanjaro, I just thought to myself, like, how cool would it be to experience it with other people? So awesome. I love that. Tell me and everyone a little bit about your background with hiking and the outdoors and some of the things you've done prior to Kilimanjaro that maybe actually got you in shape or confident that you could do something like Kilimanjaro.
I've had a lot of outdoor experience. Like I said, I've climbed a lot of mountains in my past, but I knew Kilimanjaro was going to be very different just because of the altitude. I'd never been above 14,000 feet before. So my thoughts going into it was I want to be as strong physically as I can so that the altitude has less of an impact. If I'm fit, if my legs are strong, I can get through it, even if it's hard to breathe. Going into it, my big focus was just training my legs and getting them strong. We did a bunch of training hikes. Some of them were grueling. It was winter here in Santa Fe. It was a lot of hiking in snow and trying to get above 10,000 feet as much as possible just to adapt. And in between that, since it was winter, I was doing a lot of weight training too, just to get my legs really strong. And I got to say, it really paid off. Like I felt physically really good the entire time. And so I feel like that was a good game plan to focus on, is just be as strong as I can with the environment that I have to train in.
Totally. And on that note, thank you for sharing a little bit about your training, thinking about other people who have never done something like Kilimanjaro, who want to attempt something like that. What kind of training tips do you have? Because I feel like you're someone who's constantly training for hard things. And so I just would love to get your input on that for people listening.
Like if you decide, I want to go hike this mountain and you have zero hiking experience, I still think you can do it. But you need a plan for it. It's not something that you can say, oh, I want to do this in 2 months and train and be feeling good on it. You need to say, if you have zero hiking experience, maybe next year I want to hike Kilimanjaro. So you have plenty of time to build up that fitness level and start where you're at. I think what a big mistake that a lot of people have with training is they try to go too hard too fast. And by doing that, they might get injured, they might strain muscles, and they might just have a bad experience that makes them not want to continue to prepare for this. So I just say start where you're at. Maybe you start with walking around the neighborhood. Maybe you start hiking up, but it's a slow build, not something that you can just do overnight. I spent probably 3 months preparing for this mountain, and I have a lot of experience and already have a pretty good baseline fitness. So I would say just be realistic. It's hard to find balance to not be too hard on yourself as well, but just understand where you're at, protect yourself from getting injured, and make slow progress. The slow progress is really ultimately going to get you in the best place possible when it is time to climb that mountain.
I love that. And what about the weight training? What are some of the things you did? And did you go to the gym or like where were you doing this weight training?
So I do weight training at home. I have a nice weight set up here. But if you're new to weight training, it's definitely worth it to hire a trainer, even for a few sessions, to get at least a program in place to do that and make sure your form is correct again, so you're not hurting yourself. And same thing with hiking, like start where you're at. It's not a race to see who can lift the heaviest. This is about just getting a baseline level of fitness. So start with smaller weights. You don't want to strain your back because you're trying to lift too heavy. Use the machines at a gym. That's a great place to start. There's directions right on them. You don't need anyone to spot you. So I just always say start small and you can always build up. If you start small on the first day and you're like, that was really easy, then go ahead the next time you go and increase that weight on your exercises.
I agree. And I think, what you want to get to as you're training for mountains and peaks is really having endurance as well. And as you're continuing to go on your hikes and your walk and you're doing the weight training, what you want to get to is a point where you're doing, like, let's say you start with a 1 mile hike and then your goal is to get to a 3 mile hike and then you get to a 5 mile hike, 6 mile hike. I talked about this in earlier episodes, but remember we went on that hike here. It was almost a 14-mile day and 4,000 feet. So ultimately, we had trained to do that sort of a trek. Can you talk a little bit about endurance and maybe some tips you have on that?
That's my favorite kind of training, and it is a build up. You can often Google training programs to help build up your hiking or running or walking wherever you're at. And there's some really great training programs already out there. So you don't need to recreate the wheel, but it is a build up. And one thing I love about endurance training is goal setting. That is really helpful for me. Again, with realistic goals, like you said, starting with 1 mile and then, oh, let's see if I can do 3 miles, or maybe I'm going to go for an hour. Let's see if I can go for 3 hours this next time and see how that feels. And it is this slow build up. You can also work in other things. I think a lot of endurance training is just having strong muscles as well. So one thing you can incorporate, especially if you're somewhere that doesn't have mountains, is stair stepper. I used to go and do the stair stepper. I used to live in Los Angeles at sea level, and I was training for Mount Whitney, and I would just put liters of water in a backpack and get on the Stairmaster for an hour and really practice that way. So that's a great way to build up that endurance for the uphill. But it's really all about just slowly increasing that mileage, increasing the time on the stair stepper. And for something like Kilimanjaro, I always try to do a bigger day than anything I'm going to do on the mountain. So if I know my biggest day is 4 miles and 4,000 feet of gain, I might try to hike 6 miles and 6,000 feet of gain, just so I'm like a little bit above it. And I know, oh, my biggest day, I can do it. Like there's no doubt that I can do that.
I wanted to take a moment to thank this season's Rise and Wander podcast sponsor, REI. REI is the outdoor gear retailer of the 52 Hike Challenge. I've been a member since I started my 52 hikes in 2012, and they've helped outfit me for all things hiking and outdoors since then. Becoming a member has many perks like 10% back annually on eligible purchases, a satisfaction guarantee, which gives you up to a year to return any purchases you aren't satisfied with, free shipping in the US, and so much more. Please visit them at rei.com. Join me for a year of hiking in 2025 with the 52 Hike Challenge. Commit to your personal journey outdoors alongside a supportive community and make 2025 your year of hiking. Take your family, friends, furry pets on an adventure they'll always cherish. Plus, you'll gain the physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional benefits derived through nature and hiking. Learn more and sign up at www.52hikechallenge.com. And see you on the trails. That's a great tip. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right, so let's jump into the actual trip. Can you tell me a few of your most memorable moments, whether they were highlights or even lowlights, just what your experience was?
What comes to mind was the food. The food was so good. I remember the first night at camp, they had popcorn for us, and it's like such a simple treat, but I was just like, oh my gosh, popcorn on a mountain? Like I've never had that before. And that was just one example. They made us pizza at 14,000 feet. They baked us pizza. So the food was top notch, incredible, and gave us a lot of fuel for each day. I would say the rain was definitely a challenge for every single person on the trip. It was definitely a low, to be honest, but also a really bonding experience. We're all in this together, all feeling it together, all suffering. And so, in that regard, it was a cool experience because it just brought the whole group together even more. And then, I don't know, I just loved getting to know everybody. Like the first day, we just all shared hiking next to different people and we're really getting to know everybody. And I just love those little conversations that we had, whether it was at camp or on the trail, and just really learning people on a deeper level because you are completely present. There are no distractions, there's no cell service. All you have are the people around you. So we were this little village and just traveling along the mountain together, helping each other out, getting to know each other. And so that was probably the best part is just getting to know this group of people.
I would agree with you. And I really talk about that being one of the highlights of my trip as well. I feel the word is connection. Nothing matters out there. We're all going for the same goal and we all just want to encourage each other. I really felt that sense of camaraderie. One of the highlights that I talked about was coming together to help each other out. Someone was like, my stomach hurts, and someone would be like, I have something for you. The group effort of let's help each other to succeed in this. I really love having you be a part of the group. It was such a joy. And I appreciate you saying yes to this great adventure across the world and doing something so intense. Tell me a little bit about Summit Day and how that was for you. And did you ever get sick or have any moments where you weren't feeling great or any of that? And then what was it like for you when you got to that end goal? Like when you were on top of the tallest mountain in Africa?
Summit day in one word, it would be intense, but not necessarily physically intense. I definitely physically felt really good all of Summit day. I didn't get sick. I was taking Diamox, which I think definitely helped. But I think having experience at altitude at 14,000 feet in the past also helped, as well as just our itinerary, because it was a slow 7 day itinerary time to acclimate to the altitude. So physically, I didn't have any issues at all. I don't even remember having a headache at any point. So I was pretty lucky there. But the experience itself, I mean, it was wild. There was snow flurries when we were leaving camp at 12:30 in the morning. So that was just, oh, okay. Wasn't really expecting that. And it ended up snowing, I would say, at least 2 feet while we were hiking up. And we were hiking up in basically a blizzard in the dark with just our headlamps, looking down at our feet the whole time, just looking at the feet of the person in front of you, and just having no perspective of like where you are on this mountain. You can just see snow, basically, and that was really it. But it was definitely challenging because it was cold. You couldn't stop for very long because it was just really cold. Like you had to plan your every break that we would get. You're like, okay, I'm gonna get this bar out of my pack and eat it, and then I'm gonna switch to these gloves and put those on, or I'm gonna use the bathroom. Like you only had a couple of minutes to get the most important things done each time we stopped. So that was a little bit challenging. And then I would say it was probably around 18,000 feet, maybe 17,005 to 18,000 feet. It got really intense. There were people in other groups that were having some pretty serious altitude issues. And it was still dark, and there was just a lot of yelling in Swahili. And our group ended up splitting up. And I was the last one in the first group. And I turned around, and there was no one behind me. And there was so much commotion that I didn't really know, is everyone in our group okay? What's going on? But you couldn't really stop. So I was just trudging along, hoping everything was fine. And luckily it was. Probably the most special moment, other than the summit, is getting to Stella Point, which is like the end of the steepest part of the hike. And the sky was starting to get lighter, the snow was starting to stop, and there were these two guides that had been singing the whole way up the mountain. And they were singing Hallelujah. And it was just like this spiritual, almost out of body experience. Okay, the sky is clearing, everything is going to be fine, we're going to be okay. And it was just really beautiful. The whole group reconvened at Stella Point and saw, like, okay, everybody's here, everybody's good. And we continued, and from there, hike almost like around the crater rim. And we got to the summit, and we all got there close to the same time. And we just all started crying. It was like everything that we had been through the last few days, all the rain, all of our clothes being soaking wet, then hiking in the snow. It was just everything. And we all made it. And it was just a beautiful experience. We all hugged and just really tried to soak up that experience with each other and celebrate. And I don't know, it was a moment that I will never forget and I will just cherish forever. It was just so special. So special. I think not just to me, but to everybody that was there.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, I was reliving all of that. And I love how you were painting the picture of getting to Stella Point. And I'm not going to give you my perspective because you, by this point, either have heard it or going to hear it. What are some important takeaways or lessons that the experience has instilled in you? Or maybe what were some things that you learned about yourself or thought about after the fact?
None of my rain gear functioned well and it soaked through. So I immediately got home and got a new raincoat. And when they say bring a poncho on Kilimanjaro, bring a poncho. It is so cheap and the best piece of equipment that you could possibly have. So I feel like just being a little bit more prepared. I think in the past, especially when it comes to rain, I've been a little laissez-faire about it because being in California and New Mexico, we don't have rain where it just rains all day. So I'd never experienced that. So that was one really big lesson that I learned. And probably one of the biggest lessons is prior to this trip, I did a lot of things solo. I really took pride in being able to do mountains solo, and it was this ego-driven thing for me. And I feel like climbing this mountain was a shift from that and wanting to share experiences more with people. And since then, I feel like I haven't really done anything solo, and any of my bigger adventures, I've had friends and people to join me, and it's just really made the whole experience so much better. I think I needed that lesson. I had like my younger ego-driven years, and now it's, oh, I just want to experience life with wonderful, like-minded people. So that was a huge takeaway. And then also all the friendships that I made on this trip. Like these are people that we've already reconnected and seen each other in person again since the trip. And they're people that I know I'll continue to see throughout my life. Pretty lucky to have 13 new friends.
I think it's really beautiful. I love everything you have shared. And with that, is there any advice that you would give to anyone listening to this that's thinking about hiking Mount Kilimanjaro, or anything else that you'd like to add? Anything that you think would be beneficial?
It is a big mountain, but if this is something that you want to do and you're being called to do it, there's a way to make that happen. I would just say follow your heart, follow your path, and really make a plan to make this actionable and put it to action. Other than that, I would say just enjoy that experience. Training is hard, but there is a lot of enjoyment with it, and you can get friends involved, your family involved. There's ways to make it fun. If I didn't have you for our training, it just would have been so miserable. But the fact that I was able to hike with you, it made it so much more enjoyable, and the time went by so much faster. So just find ways to make it fun and something that you look forward to doing.
Thank you so much for sharing in that experience with me and training with me. And I do agree with that. It was such a joy, but also to have seen all the work we put in and then that we were able to make it. And even if we hadn't made it, right, like I would have been extremely pleased with the effort we put in. With that, is there anything else you'd like to share before we close out our chat on Kilimanjaro?
Yeah, I think I've shared all the top tips and experiences.
Thank you so much, Jess. And my last question, what's next? What's coming up for you? What's on the agenda? What's next for adventure? Where are you wandering off to?
Now I have the high altitude bug. And so over Christmas, I'm going to go climb Orizaba in Mexico, which is the highest mountain there. It's around, I think, 18,500 feet. So a little bit shorter than Kilimanjaro, but still quite tall. So pretty excited to do that.
Keep us posted on how that goes. And everyone who's tuning in, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Rise and Wander. And if you gained some great information, please comment, share, and let us know. We appreciate that. And see you in the next episode.